Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the introduction to various Eateries Plc investor meeting. Throughout this presentation, investors will be in listen-only mode. Questions can be submitted at any time via the Q&A tab situated in the right-hand corner of your screen. Simply type your answer and press send. The company may not be in a position to answer every question it receives during the meeting itself. However, the company will review all questions submitted today and publish responses where it's appropriate to do so. These will be available via your Investor Meet Company dashboard. I'd also like to remind you that this presentation is being recorded. Before we begin, we'd like to submit the following poll. I'd now like to hand you over to Andy Bastardone, Chairman, Ishai Malkov, CEO, and Ollie Williams, CFO. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Thank you for joining us. First, I must briefly apologise for the absence of Hugh Osborne. He's actually, as I speak, he's on the phone to the government representing the hospitality industry and arguing about whatever's coming up and trying to find out whatever's coming up for us in this sector. And he'll be joining us shortly. I'm Andy Bastardone, I'm the chairman. I have had some 30 years experience of opening restaurants, mostly in the UK, mostly multiple restaurants, chains of restaurants. I started, with those of you with older memories, my kind of town, Chicago Pizza Pie Factory, Chicago Rib Shack many years ago, a small public company that was very successful. And then I teamed up with Luke Johnson and we acquired a lot of high-end restaurants, the Ivy, Caprice, Jay Shiki, which is my first experience of running as a chief executive a high-end restaurant group. And out of that, we created Strada, which was a very successful, simple wood-fired pizza, pasta, and main course concept. We built that up to 27 restaurants, as you see, and we sold it for 55 million, I think it was. And then we doubled it in size and sold it for 140 million relatively shortly afterwards. What was the importance of that? The interesting difference between that as starting a chain restaurant business to stuff I'd been involved in before is because I was running this high-end restaurant group, I realized that this sounds obvious, but most of the chain restaurants, there wasn't enough focus on the quality of the food. So I got together with the head chef of Daphne's, which was a famous Italian restaurant at the time, and out of that we created the simple Strada menu. And you are rewarded by doing a high-quality product. So it's high-quality product at mid-market prices. After that, I was involved with the co-founder of Coat Restaurants, which are 96 now. I sold out at about 45. And Coat was a bit similar to Strada in the sense there wasn't many people catering to the French market. You probably all remember Café Rouge, but that started in the mid-80s and had gradually calmed down and lost its way a little bit. So the market was wide open. So we founded Coat, which was high quality, simple French bistro food at mid-market prices. Built that up to 44, sold for 100 million. And then that was 2 years later, that sold for 240 million. There's now 96 Coat, still doing very well. And it's focusing on the product. Around the same time, we were backed by Entrepreneur to buy Bill's. Some of you have probably seen Bill's, but the original Bill's in Lewis and Brighton were very quirky daytime cafes. Lots of people wanted to buy them, but nobody could figure out how to roll them out. So we bought them, and with Bill Collinson, the founder, we expanded it. Quite different from the original idea, kept the spirit of the original idea, but we expanded it to a 65-strong restaurant group. And finally, last piece of the puzzle, recent relevant history, was I was involved in the initial 5-restaurant rollout of the Ivy, because in the past I had run the Ivy as a premium restaurant group. And we were challenged to create a rollout version of the Ivy, which we did, and that's gone on to be very, very successful. And our chief executive, Ishai Malkov, opened 30 of them over about 3.5 year period, and probably the most successful and most complicated rollout possible. So we've got lots of rollout experience. The other guy's got a lot of rollout experience, has just arrived. hot off the telephone to the government. Hopefully, has cancelled all restrictions on the hospitality sector.
Of course. Yeah. Hi, afternoon, everybody. Sorry, I was a bit late. Yes, I'm not going to go back and dwell on the events of the early 90s with Pizza Express too much, although I'd love to, because that was a very fun time. But the only point I would make really is that although it may seem counterintuitive that we have just floated a restaurant business in the teeth of probably the worst crisis that's ever faced the hospitality industry, it is actually more similar to how it was in 1993 than any time in the intervening 27 years. The early 90s in the UK, and particularly in the Southeast, well, actually all across the UK, was quite a severe recession. And we bought Pizza Express just at the end of that recession, when the high street had been absolutely ravaged, shops were closed. It was actually a pretty grim time. But because we shored up the balance sheet in Pizza Express, we repaid all the debt, we raised money for expansion, it was the best time to be expanding a business. On every high street, landlords could say we were the only quoted company at the time that were doing that expansion. We're the only people that had cash on the balance sheet. We were expanding. They were welcoming us with open arms. They were actually asking us to come to their town and saying, come into this property, take it on. And it was, obviously, I would like to say we had a fantastic team there, and we did. And investors who backed that float made more than 20 times their money by the time I'd left the board. That's not any sort of forecast of what we can do, understand, although, you know, obviously we have ambitions to do something great again. But one of the reasons, apart from the fact that I think we did have a brilliant team, was that we had a real following wind. Sites were easy to find, people were easy to employ, and competition was much less. It was just a fantastic time to be alive, and we had a really good time doing it. And so, you know, I think although this is in many ways a kind of a horrible time for the hospitality market, it's also the best possible time to have money in your bank account, have a listed currency to be out there expanding. And we really have got a good team here. It's not just Andy and myself. I mean, Andy's built up 6 different groups over the last 25 years, every single one of which has made a really good return for investors. But we've also got the team on my right. Maybe actually, yeah. Andy, you talk about the team.
Just, you know, as I was mentioning earlier about the Ivy, Ishai Malkov, he's got a ex-military background, which is very clear in the way he approaches these problems. Very, very structured, brings everybody along with him. Really, everything's got a critical path. There's a method of doing everything. But what's interesting about him, apart from his military background, is that he's worked in high-end stuff and in rollouts. So, and the ultimate achievement was rolling out the Ivy in many respects. And that mixture of experience is why we've been successful in the past with chain restaurants, because we've got a food focus at the top. He worked in New York, he worked for all the famous people, Gordon Ramsay, Zuma, Rocco, and he'll tell you some interesting stuff about that afterwards too, and their approach to rolling out. Ollie Williams, first-class cricketer, apparently. He's also only ever worked in the hospitality sector, Itsu, McDonald's. As you'd expect in a public company, highly competent accountant, financial analyst. But really what's interesting for me is that he's a great manager of people. He's not afraid to roll up his sleeves and get into a restaurant and work with the managers and the head chefs on their financial targets and educate them on target setting and how to manage their costs. This is an unusual combination in an FD, in a CFO. Again, like we were saying earlier, a chef at the top table, Matt Fanthorpe, trained in one of the most famous Michelin-star restaurants in Paris, had his own business for many years, then worked in the initial rollout of Jamie's and in Oldenstein, and then worked with Hugh on the development of Copper, which we'll tell you a bit more about. So it's always, for us, super important to have a chef at the top table because we're in the food business. Many of our competitors don't have chefs in senior roles. We don't understand that because surely we're in the food business. the other side of the thing, the other competitive advantage I think we have, I've worked with the same design builders for 25, 30 years. They've built all the restaurants I've been involved in. So they built all the Ivies, all the Stradas, all the Bills, all the Coats, as well as working for others. We don't own them, but we've had a long-term relationship with them. What does this mean? It means that under pressure, we can open many, many sites simultaneously. There was one year where I opened 20 Bills and 15 Coats, and they built more. And that means on time, on budget, and this is a really super valuable resource. On top of that, we've got a great supply chain guy who has been around since Pizza Express days, knows all the suppliers in Europe. John Metcalf ran his own wine business in Italy. And obviously, with a combination of Brexit and COVID, he's really shown again his worth by making sure we have uninterrupted supplies and a significant degree of choice if any suppliers got into trouble. So that's the head office team. It's over to you, Hugh, on the business.
Yeah, look, we've I think laboured the point on the team, and I think the reason for that is management is the most important decision that I think an investor makes before investing in any business, and particularly in troubled times like this, you want a team that have seen recessions before, that have seen bad times before, and good times before. And there's a lot of management teams can sit in front of investors and say they've got a great restaurant concept or any other concept and they can open 100 restaurants. But this team has actually done it, not once, not twice, but multiple times. This is, in my opinion, the best, the most experienced, the most modest restaurant expansion team in the whole of the UK. And the names are just there, not because I say so, but because they are there. Pizza Express, Coat, My Kind of Town, Bills, and most recently the Ivy. Andy and Ishai have just come straight from opening the Ivies, the most high quality rollout in terms of fit out, quality of food, quality of staff that's ever yet been done. They've just been doing that, and we have now got them on our team. So probably the other most important thing, maybe it's more important than the management, certainly as important, is go to a copper, go to Tavolino. This is not a concept we're selling. Yes, we're, I think, selling hopefully how good the team are to you, we're talking about, but actually this is a real business. We bought the first site for copper in 2014. We opened in 2015. I'll talk more about it later, but it exists. We've got these 6 copper sites that you can go and visit. Today you can see that at 11 o'clock on a Tuesday morning, they are super busy and pumping. They are trading well now, even with the latest measures, curfews, all the other stuff. The coppers are still trading flat to last year and actually significantly up on the sites out of town. That is incredible. Tavolino, again, go and visit it. We've opened it more recently, but it is a league above the high street, the high street Italian chain restaurants that have been around over the last few years. So that's the most important thing. Visit the actual restaurants and clubs, and we'll talk by Copper Club is more than a restaurant. It's not just a restaurant. Visit them, judge for yourselves whether you think the place is good, and then say, and is this the team that can roll them out? And one last point on this slide. We've raised the money to take advantage of this opportunity. None of us is taking any money off the table. We have raised the money. It is in the bank account, so we can turbocharge this expansion and take advantage, not take advantage of other people's misfortune, because many of the people that are running, in fact, we know almost everybody in the industry, and I wouldn't wish ill on any of them. It's a brilliant industry, and it's really sad to see what has happened. But the site availability, the availability of staff, now is the time to be spending this money, and that's why we've raised it. Look, do I need to tell anybody that this is the most disruptive event to hospitality in our lifetime, you know, maybe ever in the history of hospitality, going back as far as the Black Death. You know, it's no, it's absolutely a huge disruption, and a lot of the poor and mediocre competition has you know, sadly already gone to the wall. I think Andy has probably already said there's 22 or 26. I think, you know, it moves so fast. I can't remember how many. It's 26 different major companies already gone into insolvency. Even good businesses have been hammered by forced closure and are desperate for investment. So even the good businesses coming out of this will not be in a position to compete with us if we've got money in the bank and this team. You know, household names. You know, Carluccio's, Bella Italia, Cafe Rouge, Easy, Arse Bar, and Pizza Express. They've all in some sort of insolvency. So great sites are now vacant, closed, even in the most prosperous towns. Landlords are desperate, and you know, from this chaos and from the ashes of COVID, there's the opportunity to build, you know, potentially one of the biggest multi-site leisure groups ever. You know, it's that big an opportunity right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think what, because we've been around a long time in this industry now, I think there's a couple of things to remember. There's this concept of the food pound. How much do people spend of their food pound in eating out? What's a food pound? A food pound is everything you spend on food. It could be grocery shopping, it could be takeaways, it could be eating in a restaurant. And when I started this business, or after I started this business in the sort of 93, 94, I think it was something yeah, it was something like 14p in the pound was spent on eating out. And then over those years, so 27 years later, it's now 40p in the pound is now spent on eating out. So what? Well, why am I going on about this? I'm going on about this just because in the UK now, when I started in this business, eating out was a massive treat and lots of people didn't do it. Now it's the way people define their lives. You know, 70% of couples both work, they're cash comfortable and time poor. And you can see the growth of coffee shop businesses, all sorts of other related businesses wanting to spend money on food outside grocery stores. Now, so why am I saying this? I'm saying this because once COVID has passed and we've found drugs and vaccines and testing systems that will help us either live with it or it will disappear, the hospitality business will come back with a bang because it has done that over a 25-year period. And all those years, people would say to me, "Oh, Andy, you know, 2007, you know, what are you going to do now?" Well, we're going to found Coat and we're going to buy bills. We're going to open 100 so restaurants. You know, there's always a market for restaurants, and it's not going anywhere, and it's a cultural thing. So just making that point. So, and one of the things that held us back in the good times, site availability. Hugh's touched upon that. The whole relationship with landlords is going to change. In the old days, you'd find a great site in Windsor, you'd probably have to spend £500,000 to buy somebody to get out of that site. Then you've got to pay top rent for it, and off you go. And then you've got a rent review every 5 years up internally.
That's if you could find the site.
If you could get the site. I mean, that's the first thing. That situation, that site in Windsor, which I won't say which one it is now available for no premium, so no key money to get in, completely new terms and conditions on the lease that we can dictate. And in the past, the relationships, the power of the landlord has been really the big thing in the UK, and the tenant has not been in a very strong position. Because retail's gone down, restaurants have gone down, offices have gone down, commercial landlords now are desperate for tenants. So we will be able to get cheap sites in great towns, and we're already looking at literally, there's more than 1,000 closed Italian restaurants, for example, between the chains. So when COVID passes, as it will surely will at some level or other, when people come out and go out to eat again, and in fact they still are doing that, but even in central London, they will find much fewer restaurants to go to. So there'll be a structural reduction in our competition. So we have lots of sites, we have much less competition. I suspect 20-25% less restaurants. We will have, unfortunately, and this is a sad fact, but there are lots of highly talented, great quality hospitality staff who are either have already lost their jobs or are going to lose their jobs. And I take no pleasure in this at all. But recently we advertised for 2 sous chef positions in the big Copper Club with the igloos opposite Tower Bridge. We had 900 applicants. I mean, I can't tell you what a big number that is. We would expect maybe 20 applicants in the past. So there's this incredible shift in talent. Also, there's been an explosion of business outside London, outside the centre of London. You know, the London suburbs are very busy. It's just that central part of London that's suffering. But we think this will change. There'll be some change in consumer behaviour, and we think people will be working not completely from home, but a day and a half from home a week. And this is also very good for particularly our Copper brand. So the things that were holding it back are no longer holding us back. So we should talk a bit about brands, Copper.
Yeah, look, I just say my best advice to anyone thinking of investing in the company is go and visit a Copper, and please spend lots of money while you're there, because that will help the investment, obviously. But what is Copper? For people who haven't been to it, it's not a restaurant. So spend little time trying to educate Isha, Ollie, and Andy that it's not a restaurant. And you know, what do I mean by that? Why is it important? When I took a bit of time off from the industry, Andy was on his 5th or 6th or 7th successful group. I took a few years off, and when I came back, I didn't want to compete head to head with the increasing competition from all the different chain restaurants on the high street. So I was really interested in what had changed since the early 2000s. You know, why were the coffee shops full at 3 o'clock when restaurants and pubs were empty? But why did they close in the evenings when the pubs became full? And why did people leave the pub and go off and eat somewhere? And you know, if girls were now drinking as much as blokes, where did they like to drink? And you know, these may sound like strange things to ask, and why were people sitting outside in December? So when we designed Copper Club, it was meant to take account of those things. And so it's not a restaurant. It's Soho House without the membership. You know, a little bit detuned. It's a place people can hang out all day. They can go have breakfast, they can go to work, they can go for a coffee, they can go for a juice, they can have, and then they can sit on their laptops. And if that's all they do, we're not going to hassle them. But most people, then they stay for lunch, they stay for the afternoon. You know, they have a bottle of wine or a beer in the afternoon. So it's a bar in its own right. It's not a bar where everybody goes to the bar is waiting to go into the restaurant. And if they're in the bar, they don't have to get forced into go into the restaurant. Do they, Shai? No, they don't have to get hustled off the bar. If they want to just hang around the bar, spend, you know, 20, 30, 40, 50 pounds on a few drinks for an evening and then go home, you know, they might come back the next day for something to eat. So it's a bar in its own right. It's a coffee shop in its own right. If you just want to go for coffee, you just go for coffee. It's a place to work in its own right. If that's what you want to do, then that's what you want to do. And there are places more set up where you can eat, but actually you can eat or drink anywhere in a Copper Club. And so as a result of that, we don't compete head on with either restaurants or pubs or coffee shops, because we're all of them. And we don't compete for customers, and we don't compete for sites. We look at sites that no self-respecting restaurant chain would even look at. And you know, our first site was a really truly awful hotel in Sonning in Berkshire. And Sonning's a small village outside Reading, which was only famous because George Clooney had bought a house there. And I think Theresa May is the local MP, and she came to our opening, and we had to think about whether that was on brand or not, but it was, anyway, it was great. And so it was a terrible restaurant in a terrible hotel, and the hotel restaurant took less than £250,000 a year. It's £5,000 a week. That same space now as a Copper Club regularly takes more than £300,000 a month. So it takes more every month than it used to take in a year. It's a real club venue. It rocks. And a bit like Soho House, again, it's not one type of venue. We don't just do that. We have flagship places, a bit like a Babington House or whatever, where there's rooms and maybe there's yoga there's a yoga studio, and there's paddleboarding, and there's a gym, and the full kind of club experience with 50 rooms. And then we have kind of high street hubs like the one in Henley, which still have a bar, a kind of restaurant area and a lounge, but they're in a more traditional restaurant space. And then we have like Tower Bridge site, spectacular site, igloos, 150,000 Instagram followers, one of the top 10 things to do in London, so a bit more glitzy, mega club brasserie. So it's not a chain and it's not a restaurant. It's a club, and yeah, it's rocking. First one's been open 5 years. It's still rocking. And Tavolino
is our new Italian brand. Why Italian? There's a parallel to the Coke story. YouGov just recently did a poll that showed Italian food was not only #1 cuisine in the UK, it's #1 cuisine in the world. So what has that resulted in? That's resulted in a massive, massive Italian chains coming. And I don't know why, but back to my original philosophy about chefs at the top. A lot of these chains did not have any chefs at the top of their organisation, and they produced okay product, and then they competed on price. So they went into this discounting war. And the parallel is with the French market with Cote, where nobody was doing it really. So there was an opportunity to do much higher quality French food at the same price as Capi Rouge was at the time. Now, the Italian, there's a great demand for Italian food. Nobody's really focused on the product. So we're going to do high quality Italian food at mid-market prices. And if you go to Tavolino, you'll see what I'm talking about. So we've got a great chef who's the starting point to help me develop the menu, a bit like the Daphnis chef who helped me develop the original strada from Giorgio Locatelli's kitchen. And we produced this fantastic quality food. It's really being well received. And we think there's at least room for 50 full-service Tavolinos, which are equivalent of Italian Cote, if you like. And for the record, there's 94 Cotes now. And then within that, there's an opportunity to do pure pasta restaurants. In London, particularly, there's 5 or 6 emerging small brands who have been doing fabulous business, just focusing on fresh pasta. And once you've eaten fresh pasta made on site, you won't go back to a chain Italian restaurant because you'll notice a difference. And we can charge you the same price for that as you would in one of the chains. So it's a massively popular cuisine. We did it with French. We're going to do it with Italian. There's also an opportunity for pure pizza. The only one I would cite, which I think is very good, is Francomanca. There's an opportunity to do another type of specialist pizza outlet as well. And we think in total, there's room for 100 conservatively Italian operations that we can develop and run. So I'm really excited about that. And it's high quality food at mid-market prices. Nobody objects to that.
Right, so Andy and Hugh will talk for hours about the opportunities that present themselves and why our brands in particular are sort of perfectly placed to exploit them. I think you've been in luck today. That's the least I think they've ever done. But I want to talk about the business that we currently have right now and go back to that Hugh alluded to earlier, because we have a strong base business now. We have some fantastic assets and we have some highly profitable assets. The Copper Club estate across the different formats, and they are different. We have sort of 2 of what each of the sort of formats we would look at are all profitable. So all 6 sites are profitable and doing well right now. So Andy and Ishai joined us sort of about 12 months ago now, and we've been busy preparing for this growth. I think we were, as is clear, we were going to roll these sites out anyway pre-COVID. Obviously, the opportunity from COVID accelerates this, but we were ready to go before COVID. We opened 3 sites in the financial year before COVID, all above our expectations, all strong, profitable sites, and we're on site now, and we're about to open our 7th Copper Club in Cobham. And I think we sat at a board meeting just before COVID when we signed that off, and we were excited about that site. And I think it's almost, that site in particular is almost perfectly designed for this post-COVID world and fits perfectly with what we're about to, or trying to achieve. I think we've been working on the menu. As Andy alluded to, it's so important as a restaurant brand to not forget the quality of the food. And we've not only worked on that, on the quality of the food, we've also improved the operations and the margins on that menu, and we won't lose focus on that as we grow. We've consolidated the hotels at Sonning and Streatley, 2 of the hotels that Hugh talked about, into the group, so that we can consolidate the management of those and run them as single entities. And finally, Andy sort of touched on the brand of Tavolino and the new site at More London at Tower Bridge. what he didn't touch on is that we've got 2 other Strata sites ready to go to be converted into the Tavolino brand, and that is a really exciting kickstart for, you know, at the moment just a 1-site brand, that we've got 2 other sites ready to go to really kickstart that, and the site on the South Bank is a fantastic site to do that. And finally, I just wanted to touch on the performance post lockdown, because when you work for a restaurant chain, when you're the CFO of a restaurant chain and the government tell you to shut and you're sitting at home for 3 months with no money coming in, you obviously worry about what the future looks like and whether you're the right brands to take advantage of the world post-COVID. And I think we were all fairly confident, or very confident, that our offers would be perfectly suited, but you don't know it until it happens. And I think our results have been, you know, really impressive, above our expectations since we reopened, with positive like-for-likes in the Copper Club estate up to the end of August. And that is obviously split across the sites, but you've got some sites outside of London doing some absolutely fantastic double-digit growth. And then finally, the Tavolino site, which has only been open for a month or so, but has performed above our expectations, or above our expectations, and it's really exciting. I think we're really keen to see where that's going to go when everyone comes back to London. Isha is going to talk you through the growth.
Yeah, sorry, I'll be repeating sort of some of the things that Hugh and Andy already said, but just to sort of illustrate how this looks. So our growth will be made up of Coppa and the different iterations that Coppa can be, Tavolino and the iteration that Tavolino can be, the acquisitions and that potential acquisitions that and rollout that Andy touched on. So we find a nascent brand that we feel sort of complements what we do, and that we can help them by sort of superimposing our structure and our strength and helping them grow. And the last but not least is the hotel element of our business. So aside from restaurant, we also have 2 hotels as part of our estate, and we have a hotel operating arm. So we are specialists in both ends. I mean, I personally have worked in both in restaurants and hotels, but we you know, they don't naturally mix. You know, I guess the old adage about hoteliers not knowing how to run restaurants and vice versa. You know, there's maybe some truth to it. Luckily for us, again, we have the expertise, and what we can do is, especially in I guess in this environment where a lot of country hotels, you know, maybe an owner has maybe 10 or 15 sort of 3-4 star hotels out there, and obviously business has been suffering with everything that's happening. And what we can do is we can offer a solution to sort of utilize their real estate, you know, make sure that the rooms run properly, that we give them a reason for being, putting a Coppa Club in that hotel, and giving them sort of a new lease of life, you know, being able to run their events for them, or any part of those, so rooms, events, or F&B. This is our 4-pronged attack, so to speak. And the other thing I would like to touch on is, maybe, again, I'm not sure how many of the participants today are from the industry or from outside, but sort of, you know, touching very briefly on how is this going to work. So why potentially are we better placed than our competitors out there? What does it take to actually make this work? Because as Hugh said initially, you know, anyone can sit in front of you and say we can open 100 restaurant or 200 restaurant. You know, we've got the money for it. The money is one element of it, but really the money is a technicality. In order to do this, so be able to grow at pace, so to take something and make sure it grows at pace, you need to have a few things. One thing that you need is military structure and discipline for it. There's no other way, especially in times like this. You have to be able to be extremely militarized. You can't be you know, this can't be a democratic process where everybody sits around the campfire and you sort of talk about it through the night and then decide what to do. It needs to be quite military-like. So everybody has a role to fulfill. I know it's besides the point, but it is very important, and not everybody out there has it. The second thing that you need to do is you need to have gone through a crisis to be able to know how to act during a crisis, because it's one of those things that until you've done it, you don't know how that works. You know, where Andy alluded to, you know, what happens in 2007, 2008, when everything was crumbling, and you know, Colt was snapping up sites. Hugh back in the 90s with Pizza Express. I mean, personally, my personal experience in 9/11 in New York, when, you know, obviously you know, with the Twin Towers, and it was a very tough time for the industry, and there was a lot of fallout from that. But also with that fallout, there came a lot of opportunities and a lot of learnings for me personally. So again, the military structure, the experience, and then sort of, I know it's oversimplification, but how do you do this? How do you open a restaurant? You need three things basically. You need quality, consistency, and pace, which we've all touched on, but I just want to focus on them. So quality, meaning quality is always at the top. So whether Andy was referring to the food being quality, quality in, if you control it well, means quality out. And the quality is first. The consistency, the ability to deliver that quality consistently in multiple openings and to be able to do it at pace. So the speed in which you do it is also a big factor. Now, there are operators out there, and we've sort of mentioned them by name, that they do a fabulous job and have done a fabulous job, but also we know that the past 6 months have shown a lot of weaknesses in others. And I think I'd be hard-pressed to say how many operators out there do you know personally, do I know personally that can deliver that quality, consistency, and pace? And I would be hard-pressed to be able to count more than a few. And I think that's where our expertise and experience enables us to take advantage of this sort of situation. So we've been there before. We are the right size, so we don't have 200 sites now. We are 10 sites, and they're all profitable, and we don't have a large tail behind us. We've got the structure and the know-how, and also we have the right product for these times. So both with Tavolino and with Coppa, we are, whether by luck or by I think part of it is, there's a lot of planning on Hugh's part and doing it for a long time, but also some of it maybe luck. I don't know. We do have the product now to fit this new reality. So I think it's now down to us just to, now that we've got the money in the bank, is basically to pounce and utilize these opportunities. Hugh?
Thanks, Ishai. Yeah, look, if you're going to open, in 1 year in Pizza Express, we opened 52 restaurants. We had an ambition to do one a week, and we did that back in '95 or something. But to do that, every team needs the military guy, and so we've got one of those, as well as the concept guys and the food guys. You've got to have the military guys who gets the stuff done. Use of funds. As I said, this is 100% expansion capital. Neither Andy or I or anybody else taking a penny off the table, and we've no intention of doing so anytime soon. Before we thought of floating, we were going to open, we planned to open 2 to 3 Coppas, 2 to 3 Tavolinos a year. We had it all mapped out. We had a nice, it was a nice plan. It would have grown profits, very happily as it was. We are raising this money to turbocharge that expansion, and that is why we're raising it. And I cannot tell you how, being a listed company with money in the bank, I cannot tell you how big an advantage that will give us, but it will be massive. All the landlords looking at people, private equity back, loads of debt, loads of this, struggling, and then we'll be there, money in the bank, share price they can see in the paper. They will want us in those sites. I absolutely guarantee that will be the case. And as I said, this team, we've got the experience. I'm not going to tell you again how wonderful we are. Maybe one more time. No, I won't. Okay, I won't go on about that anymore. But actually, it's not because we say so. It's because the actual documented, proven track record says so. And the business, again, we said, it is partly luck. We designed Coppa Club, was trying to design for the way the market was going, and COVID has accelerated all that. It couldn't have been designed better for a post-COVID world. Big spaces, plenty of room for social distancing, set up for people not in the office to be able to work. Those who say they're working from home, actually quite a lot of them are working from Coppa, and while also being fed and watered. It's a good concept for the 2020s. And likewise, Tavolino, the devastation in the high street has hit the mid-market chain Italian sector harder than anybody else. If there was ever an opportunity to bring in a high-quality Italian, the level between the sort of coat and the ivy, now is the time. And COVID has again completely accelerated that opportunity. And yeah, in terms of other things, we know everyone, pretty much who's anyone in the industry. We know what's going on in all the other companies. We know which is a good company that's just been hit by COVID, which is a bad company before. We're monitoring all the other opportunities. There may be other stuff as well. With the money in the bank, the listed currency, we're going to build this into something pretty good, I think. And thank you for listening, and we'll move on to questions.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Hugh, Andy, Charlie. Thank you very much for presenting. Ladies and gentlemen, do please continue to submit your questions using the Q&A tab situated on the right-hand corner of your screen. But just while the company take a few moments to review those investor questions submitted already, I'd like to remind you that recording this presentation, along with a copy of the slides and the published Q&A, can be accessed via your investor dashboard on the Investor Meet Company platform. Lastly, before I hand back to the team, I would like to remind you that your feedback is important to the company. Immediately after the presentation has ended, you'll be redirected for the opportunity to provide feedback in order the company can better understand your views and expectations. Perhaps before we look at some of the live questions that have come in, we did have a couple of pre-submitted questions, most of which you've covered off. But perhaps there's one just about geographic focus for your rollout. If I could just pose that to you. I did think you did cover most of that off, but just if there's anything else to add there, please.
I think, good operational practice is you build out from the south. That's what I've done with all the businesses. So, we're predominantly in the south, and we will just continue growing. It just makes life easier. There's absolutely no science to it. It's just obvious that rather than rush up to Edinburgh, we'd rather go to Bath. Not that there's any difference between those restaurant towns, just in terms of logistics.
Fantastic, thank you very much. And perhaps if you could just have a little look through the Q&A that's come in, and if there's anything you can add or answer, that'd be great. If you could just read out the question, that'd be fantastic.
Looking for rolling out so there's one here from Nick. What's the time you are looking to rolling out, and are you waiting for a little more COVID clarity? Well, two things there. One, yes, obviously we're all waiting for a bit more COVID clarity, but what we do think is going to happen is this is the first wave of problems that the industry is facing, and we think there's been a lot of government support, and we think even more, unfortunately, for people involved, even more sites will become available in the early part of the new year when the various government support schemes peter out. So I think we've got eight in total, 6 openings and 2 conversions planned for this year. And we'll probably go a bit slowly at the start and speed up once we've got more clarity with COVID, and also when more opportunity arises, because we're only halfway there in terms of the shakeout.
Maybe you can answer the next one. So just another question from Abby. Abby
Shall I do that one?
Yeah. Oh yeah, maybe you. So as you mentioned, there are a number of distressed brands. What's your preferred route to buy a distressed brand or to go down a organic route?
I think on that, first, there's 2 different sorts of distress. There's one, there were a number of restaurant concepts and chains that were really kind of in trouble or fading anyway, and however distressed those are, however cheap, we would not be trying to turn around brands that we didn't have a future. That's way too hard, if indeed it's possible at all. And in fact, I would, even with a strong company, I would hate to be in a position with 300 sites going into this, even if I had a good company. The idea of negotiating on 300 landlords, 300 sets of staff on furlough, 300, it's just a nightmare. So I think that is all really difficult stuff. On the other hand, as Andy said, there are some really good young companies, but with just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sites who are doing nothing wrong, running a bit lean on capital, as you do when you're in a startup. And they had really good concepts going into this, but they've been really badly affected. And now they need a bit of help financially and with the rollout. And it could be that amongst those kind of emergent brands, we find something good to add to our portfolio. But the main thrust of it is organic rollout. There are so many opportunities out there. It is difficult to rule anything out. The opportunity we can see right here and now is that in Andy's inbox, he's got 1,000 sites, many of which were in places where before you couldn't buy a site for love or money. That's the main opportunity. Having said that, every day things change. We know everything that's going on. If a really interesting group comes up that we think still got growth potential and expansion potential, and it's a purely financial or where we can help financially and with expertise, then of course we'll look at that too. It's filtering the opportunities now as opposed to trying to find them. We've all got calls coming in every day.
I think there's yeah. So how much? Maybe that's more for Ollie. So how much of the 25 million from Alex? How much of 25 million is already earmarked for expansion plans, and how much will you keep as dry powder during the current crisis?
Yep, thanks, Alex. So yeah, just first of all, just to be clear, the money raised, the 25 million, as you said, is all staying in the business and it's all for expansion. Look, in terms of the current crisis, I think as we alluded to, we feel like our sites, as large sites, are well set up to cope with the next 3, 4, 5, 6 months, however long these restrictions go on. We have big sites which make social distancing easier, and obviously the shutting at 10 is, you know, is a pain for everyone. But I think we're not a restaurant business that rely on the wet trade late in the evening. So I think that we will look after, Isha and I, as you can imagine, we'll look after every penny over the next 3, 4, 5 months and make sure that the money's still there in the bank for the exciting expansion plans as the sites become available.
There's a problem. There's a question from Nick S. Freehold or leasehold? If the latter, how long a lease and what size of site do you consider? I meant to actually mention the freehold. One of the things that was very good for us at Pizza Express in those early 90s was we could sometimes pick up freeholds. We've just done this down in Cobham. There was a small Strada restaurant there, but it wasn't big enough for a Copper or Tavolino. The bike shop next door went bust. Then the estate agent got in arrears the rent. We've now bought the whole building freehold, and we're going to be able to put a roof terrace with igloos on it in the middle of Cobham, which is going to be amazing. And the reason we could do that is because we bought the freehold, and hence we could get planning permission for the whole site and do something really special. Long term, will we keep freeholds? I don't know, but we certainly, having the money in the bank and the PLC covenant gives us that opportunity as well. And so that's on it. In terms of size of site, the big Coppers need need big property, need big sites, so 5,000-6,000 square foot for the full kind of flagship site. But then we do the high street kind of hub model of Copper, and Tavolino is much more suited for a more traditional restaurant site in a really good place. So the flexibility of the concepts we've got is we can take different types of site, and I think that answers that. And while I'm on that question, Matt P says 31 below part of the portfolio. Yes, it is. It's essentially Copper Club bar. It's the bar version of Copper as opposed to being a separate brand. It's a little bit small for the social distance world we're in at the moment. So we're going to have to reassess how this lasts and how this runs before we decide its future. Because it's more of a bar, it's probably our only slightly COVID less friendly venue. So
we're opening it tomorrow. So
we're opening tomorrow, so we'll see how that goes. And yeah, good. I think that's me again on the typical Copper customer.
So yes, I'll just read it out. So Ben is asking, how would you describe typical Copper customer versus lounger customer, for instance? How many Henley on Thames are there in the UK in terms of rollout, and how does the demographics work?
Yeah, and I really kicked myself for missing loungers as an investment, because I was aware of it when they just had 2 places, and I thought this is absolutely on the money for the way the market is going. And what they've done is an all-day clubby type version of pubs. And Copper is a little bit, it's slightly higher up the market and more towards a Soho House, as I've said. So, you know, that's really the difference. It's the kind of Soho House type customers who don't want to actually sign up for $2,000 a year of membership, etc., and want to drop in and work and whatever. Loungers is doing similar thing, but in the kind of pub customer trading up, if you like, for the all day. So a lot of the themes are similar. Our customers are, you know, a little bit different. We sell actually more food. We have more people working and doing all day stuff compared to them. But lounges is a brilliant concept, and I cannot believe that, having missed the opportunity to invest in Nando's in 1994, having turned down that one, I turned down lounges like 2 or 3 years ago. So that was, but it's a good concept, and if you like, we're an upmarket version of that. And the answer to the Henley on Thames point, you know, it's interesting. If you go to London, there's loads of places you can use like a Copper. You know, there's the Hoxton, there's a Soho House, there's all these clubs and hotels. Soon as you go outside London to all the kind of wealthy, reasonably wealthy areas, they don't exist. There's no way you can go and hang out all day. Yes, there's a coffee shop. Yes, there's a pub, and yes, there's a restaurant. But there is nothing like copper club in these towns, and not just in the southeast. But as Andy said, well, the southeast for logistics purposes is the obvious place, but you could just as well be in York or Leeds or Manchester, assuming city centres ever reopen. So it's there's demand for this way of working, for sure.
I think
it's probably more.
There's maybe a couple more questions. Sorry, we can't see any new ones.
I think that is. I think, guys, you've gone through and you've done a very, very great job of actually answering all the questions as you've gone through. So thank you very much indeed. And of course, if any more questions do come through, the company will be able to review those questions submitted today by investors and publish responses where appropriate to do so on the platform. Just conscious of time as well, so we are coming up to that hour. Just before we do go, Hugh, perhaps I could just ask for a couple of lines just to wrap up from you ahead of directing investors for some feedback. Okay,
yeah. Well, I think I've summarised the proposal completely. It's obvious that it's counterintuitive to launch an IPO of a restaurant group into the teeth of the worst crisis in hospitality ever. We understand that. That's why we're doing it. And I'm pleased to say we got it done thanks to WH Ireland, who did a great job, and thanks for the investors for supporting it. All the investors that have come on board, I guess they see why this opportunity exists. And I can say the next 3 to 6 months, we fully expect to be tough for the industry. But within that toughness will be the opportunity for us and people. I don't believe in the long run, human beings are going to get less sociable. Human beings are going to want to go out less. And I don't think people will actually go back to wanting to cook every meal at home. So in the long run, hospitality industry will revive and we'll be right up there, hopefully leading it. And so thank you to everyone for tuning in.
Yeah, well, thank you.
That's great, guys. Thank you very much for such a comprehensive run through, and congratulations on your recent listing. So thanks again to the various Eateries team for updating investors today. Could I ask investors not to close the sessions? You will be automatically redirected for the opportunity to provide feedback. If you've accessed the meeting through our website, the feedback form will appear a couple of seconds after the end of the webinar in front of you. If you access via the link in the email, you'll be asked to log in and give your feedback. Do please take a few moments to do so. Your feedback's always important. So on behalf of various Eateries Plc, an investor meet company, thank you very much for attending today. That concludes today's session. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you.